What's up, Chumbags? Welcome to the HQ. My name's Sri.
And my name's Alexa.
And this is The Catch Up. No, it's not a show about smacking the back of bottles to get the last little bit of tomato sauce out. It's about catching up on the most popular TV shows. And look, honestly, if this show was targeted, it's about me. It's that I am terrible at watching TV shows.
Accurate.
During my time in film school, there was a number of shows that I kept getting pestered about, like, you have not seen this? And essentially, the goal of this show is to, one, get me to watch the show, and two, because, give me a platform where I can then talk about what I think about them, because, nothing motivates me like putting a camera in front of my face. So this is going to be a brand new endeavor. And again, as we adapt and everything on this channel, we want your feedback. So let us know, from have you watched Breaking Bad? If there's other shows that you want me to check out specifically, because Alexa's pretty much seen every TV show ever.
Not every, but I've seen a lot.
And, including this one, which kind of, I guess, brings us to this episode. This is season 1 of Breaking Bad, starring Bryan Cranston,
Aaron Paul.
Aaron Paul, it's just the characters in my head.
They are the characters. It is true. It's Walter White and Jesse Pinkman are the main actors in this.
Yeah, they're the stars of the show. And the show is created by Vince Gilligan. Now, with that brief setup out of the way, what I was mentioning earlier, have you never seen this? This is a prime, this and Game of Thrones were the two shows that I kept getting asked about.
Yeah. And even for this show, I watched it a little bit late. I watched it during college, so all 5 seasons were already out, and I binged the whole thing. And and I had been pestered about it already. And now we're about 5+ years after I watched it.
Yeah.
And so you still haven't. So I'm sure it's been continual pestering. So this was definitely, when we were talking about this idea for a show, I was like, Breaking Bad's the first one. Because it is just such an iconic series that so many people have watched, so many people still talk about, that I felt it was the perfect beginning of you getting your TV show education.
Yeah. I'm getting taken to school. And I'm going to learn how to cook meth by the end of this, I think.
That's the goal.
Now, full honesty, I actually watched maybe almost the entirety of the first episode before. And I remember distinctly watching that episode and being like, yep, this is not at all what I'm in the mood for. And then I went and, watched Seinfeld or something.
Right.
And I really do think that there is a, right time for someone to watch something or experience something, even if it's a video game or watch a movie or read a book. Some things are meant to be watched at some certain times, and if you're lucky, that it'll kind of line up. And I think for me, it lined up pretty well. I mean, I'm not just saying that because I'm going through a midlife crisis and I'm trying to find someone local dealer that I'm trying to work with. Or I'm not saying that for my fashion statement, which this is how I'm going to look now from now.
That I was just about to comment on. I feel like you've gotten really inspired by the Heisenberg look.
Yeah. I go by Hindenburg actually. That's my street name. So, I have quite a few thoughts on just season 1 of this show.
Yeah, we've yet to watch the rest.
Yes, yeah.
We'll continue. Season 2 coming.
And I have, my experience is very. I went in tempered. I'll say that, because I didn't want to go into a show like this with this is going to be the best show ever. That's always just
a recipe for disaster or disappointment.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So I went in with tempered expectations, and what I ended up getting was a show that surprised me on almost every front that you can imagine. Mm-hmm. So first of all, the acting. I think we were talking about it, and while it was a joke that.
Right, they're actors.
They are so good. Aaron Paul and Bryan Cranston are just living there, and all the rest of the cast as well, who I can't name off the top of my head at this moment. Everyone is living their roles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's never a time, even like Bryan Cranston, who obviously I'd seen in shows like a Malcolm in the Middle, the dad who's always in his underwear, something that he does continue that part. But he's it's a comedy role.
Under this, I have just in my underwear,
just tighty whities,
just tighty whities. Yep.
But, and so but it's a comedic role, and I've seen him, mostly you'd seen him in comedies besides Breaking Bad, and so seeing him in this extremely intense role, there is very little comedy. There's still moments of jokes and stuff, but there is his character is not a comedic character. He is very serious. He's very depressed. He's very just all negative headspace pretty much. And so it's really was wonderful. I remember back when I first watched it, like I was just blown away by his performance.
Yeah.
And then alongside that, you have Aaron Paul, who is just the perfect Jesse Pinkman. Like the vibes he gives off and their relationship with each other. I mean, they're even still friends today. They own like a tequila company together and stuff. And so you can tell that that chemistry is there right away. Like,
No pun
even though
intended.
they aren't getting along. I didn't even mean to. It really wasn't intended. But you can tell that, you know, even when they don't get along, they just have such good energy with each other throughout the whole show.
Yeah, and I would. This is one of those shows that I think that, and obviously I don't. This isn't our other show, Never Have I Ever. So there's no Blu-ray extra features where we could get a peek behind the scenes, right? And so I'm not sure if this actually happened, but I think this is. It feels like to me as a viewer, this is one of the situations where I feel like the camera test just really worked here, because this has had to be a case of you put these two actors together and you're like, oh, this is it. We got
right.
this.
Like,
this is the show.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the crucial part of the show. And one of the things that I think is so impressive, sticking with acting specifically, is that there's a lot of small mannerisms that the characters do that, and also to the credit of the direction team, which again we'll get to as well. But they cut to those shots. They keep the shots that are maybe not like they'll linger on a shot for a little bit, and they'll give you the time with that character in that close up or in that moment, for the actor to not always verbalize. They don't always have to speak the lines, but you can tell in their face, their reactions, the way that they look, that what they're feeling. And I think that's the combination of that is just really effective here, and just makes for a show that you're where, as ridiculous and crazy as the idea is, it's
believable.
You care about these characters, you know.
Yeah, even when they're making questionable choices.
Yeah, I mean, like, Walter White is, by the end of the first season, he's a murderer. He's killed someone. He's a drug dealer. But yet you're like, God, I hope he makes some good meth.
For him.
I'm hoping he sells this meth. You know, like
yeah. I will talk more about, I think, that a little bit later. Sure. But kind of off of that, not only with the reactions, but the writing itself. You know, it chooses its words wisely. You know, it doesn't have too much dialogue, like you were saying. Like some characters do, like Hank will just keep talking, which is very much fitting for his character, you know. But overall, the writing is also extremely natural feeling. You know, sometimes you watch shows and conversations don't feel as organic. Yeah. And I would say a mixture of both the actors and the writing has allowed for, like, there's no times where you're taken out of it because of a line. You're like, why would they say that? You know, like that just doesn't happen in season 1 of the show.
I mostly agree with that. So I'll have two scenes that come to mind that for both. So for the reason why I think that the show is really well written, I think there's, at least again, going off of this first season experience here, I think the best scene to really encapsulate that for me is where Walter's being kind of, it's a confronted, maybe it's like where they sit him down, they're like, hey, like, we need to talk about you not seeking treatment for your cancer. And it's essentially Walt, Skylar, Marie, Hank, and the son, Walt Jr.
Easiest one to remember.
And that whole scene I thought was really, really good in terms of just, it just cuts between these characters talking, but the way they talk and each of the characters deliver, they're trying to say the same thing but different ways. The way Hank says it is just not as eloquently worded as maybe like Skylar is. And then you expect that, and also like how Walt Jr. kind of reacts, and like you get his
Walt Jr. I mean, I can't think of the actor's name right now. I should have written it down, but he really does a great job in that scene specifically. Like the emotion of that, like I got emotional rewatching it, knowing what was going to happen. Like, cause just the way he portrays it is just so good.
Yeah. And, again, this really kind of emphasizes how deliberate the editing feels in this show. And they kind of prioritize those long takes where they don't have to cut away. And they hold on silence stuff. So it's not immediately like, okay, her dialogue's done. Let's get her out of there. It's not. They let you sit with that, and I think those moments are well, I like to call them punctual editing. That's kind of the exclamation mark maybe at the end of the sentence type of thing that is done through editing that maybe a lot of people will pick up on subconsciously, but not maybe a conscious like, oh, they're doing this on purpose. And then to flip that, the other side of that, the one reason there's actually one scene specifically that comes to mind that I was like, the only scene where I was like, oh, I'm not a huge fan of the writing here. Okay. And it was actually it was the therapy scene. Where essentially like it's right after, I believe it's right after or right before, I think it's right after Walt has gone into therapy, or sorry, not therapy, chemotherapy. Okay. And
I was trying to think, I'm like, when was the therapy scene? I was really like ragging my brain.
This is is a therapy scene where it's or like a group, like a meeting where it's cancer patients and their families kind of talking about like, hey, this is like this is what I'm going through and whatever. And I thought that scene was it's not like, it's specifically Skylar kind of talking. She's like just says a whole bunch of stuff, and I thought it was like so much of it felt like just like exposition or stuff like I didn't need. And so I think that whole scene was just kind of like thrown out there for like, hey, if you don't get what's going on, and then also I think it was I don't know, look, I haven't been in that situation, so part of that is also like a little bit different. I haven't been to AA or anything either. But it's it feels like it was too much of throwing him under the bus and then being like, like just in front of everyone. And that was a little bit.
See, it's interesting that you have that take on that scene, because I see what you're saying, but I disagree with your opinion on it for how I received it, is because it felt like she was a bit uncomfortable, and like, so she was rambling a bit, and then like saying maybe a bit more than she wanted to say because she was so like nervous about the situation and stuff. So for me, it kind of made her feel more real. Was kind of how I saw it. I don't disagree with you that, she didn't have to say everything she said. Like some of what, I agree with that. But for me, it had a different impact.
Well, there you go. I mean, there's always a different kind of way, but that scene specifically, I mean, I have it in my notes too. Like, they just didn't feel, with everything else for me, feeling so organic.
It's one of the weaker scenes, I would say. Still,
like, everything kind of keeps moving, and I thought that one kind of slowed down the pacing for a bit. But moving on, because there's overwhelmingly positive stuff in my notes. The show, I think one of the reasons why it's a decently length show, I mean, it's 45 minutes, I think, pretty much every episode.
Yeah, it was an hour when it aired back in the day with ads.
With ads and everything, yeah. And the reason why I think the show moves at like a 30-minute episode pace is because the show is really good at having constant setups and payoffs, and it's not necessarily that there's always like, it's not always a life or death situation.
Sometimes it is. But...
So sometimes it is, but I think that again, I'm going to a scene that I can kind of pull from memory. I think it's one of the starting of one of the episodes, but it's essentially a birthday party for one of the Walt's old friends, and there's a setup of like, okay, what is going on here, and then like, even within that party, like Walt's very like self-conscious about the present that he got, and so there's this tension that kind of keeps building, and then ultimately the tension is, it's actually like kind of subverted, and it's like, that's not the thing that's going to blow up in this situation. It's actually the stuff about the cancer, and that scene
not
kind of
their seeded past with gray matter and all that stuff. The company that Walt had co-founded, but then it's kind of pushed out of, and like they kind of keep that vague, and it goes more into the route of they're still his friends, and they care about the fact that he's going through this cancer, and they know how expensive it is and all of that. Then it really is, I think, a great that scene really exemplifies Walt's pride, which is obviously a key character trait of him, as we've seen throughout season 1. And I think that was one really great way to showcase it.
Yeah. I mean, there's a few examples that I can think of too that kind of make me question, okay, and this is, I think, a point of debate that I think the show is trying to make is Walter doing this because, in that the not therapy scene, like the intervention, let's say the cancer intervention scene, for lack of better words, where he says that he's doing it because he's never had any like control over his life. So he's like, this is the first time where I'm like, I have control over it, which is also a little bit kind of like poignant, the fact that he then doesn't actually have control, because then he ends up doing it because, you know, he decides he doesn't want to do it, and then he actually ends up doing it because everyone's kind of like, you should do this, like, you know, you're like, this is the thing. Anyway, I digress. But so the question is, like, is he doing this because he wants to take control, or is he doing it for his family, or is it ego? Like, you know, there's a different kind of point of like, where is this character coming from?
There's a lot of moral ambiguity.
Yeah. Now, going back to, I mean, I guess not necessarily just that birthday scene. There's, it happens all the time of like, there's payoffs and stuff like that. There are some that I'm like interested to see where they go. Like, for example, his friend's wife. We kind of figured it out. I mean, that there's a flashback of this like silhouetted woman, and Walt kind of explaining some, I'm sure, advanced physics, chemistry, whatever, science. I'm not a scientist. And you can kind of tell he had some other romance that wasn't Skylar, and we find out that it's the friend's wife. And that they had some sort of a past. And I think, like, you know, where does that go? Obviously, we don't know yet. It's the end of season 1. So
there's a lot of unanswered
there's some stuff that I'm curious to see how that pays off, because that felt a little bit like, there's also like a little love triangle romance thing that's going on. But there's also the stuff, when it works, it really, really works. So there's so many payoffs that be it from, you know, the look that I'm having now, the first look of the first time you see him, it's such a like
iconic.
It's a great scene, and you know, they started like, I'm pretty sure that's a cold open almost on that, and then we go back and kind of get this idea of like, okay, how the hell do we end up here?
They do that a fair amount in the show. Yeah,
they, you know, tease a little bit, and then they go back, and if you think about it, I think that the show is written, the structure of the first season is written kind of intelligently as a pilot for something. But of course, before we get to that, let's hear a quick word from our sponsor.
And we're back for Sri to finish his thought.
Yeah, so going back to it, right? The first season is actually, you know, the pilot episode is Walt kind of getting right into it. He's in the thick of it. You know, we think at the start of the episode, he's going to get busted by the cops. He's in his underwear. His RV's crashed.
And gun.
Yeah, there's so much, and then he essentially is like, actually, this is a terrible idea. We can't do this. And then like they're immediately put in a place where they can't really function as they were. And then the show kind of takes a step back, and it's like, okay, now let's get to understand Walt and like who he is, what his schedule is, maybe his place in society, and what kind of other people think about him. And then essentially, it's almost like a magnet of like these two characters, Jesse and Walt, are kind of pushed aside, and then slowly, by the end of the first season, they're like, oh no, actually they have to meet. Like this is like the both of their lives need the other person to be in it. You know what I mean? Like and so I think that is a really cool structure for a show.
They have a very magnetic relationship, you know, where it's like they pull apart, come back together, pull apart, come back together.
Yeah.
Where it seems like they just can't get away from each other at some points.
No, yeah. And the setup gives you so much of a taste of what's to come, and I can only imagine again like what is to come with this show, with, you know, a few seasons that it's 5 seasons total.
5, yeah,
which is pretty impressive in its own way, of like just how prolific the show is for just being like, hey, 5 seasons and we're done.
Yeah, they ended. They didn't know it was everything was this is the full story arc. There's no like canceled. There's no it ended where they wanted to end.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing for me is, again, it's another thing that I've specifically written down because it was a thought that I had that was very strong in my head, which is essentially it's not that by the end of the show, by the end of the first season, it wasn't just that I was invested in these characters, but it more so felt like I was, you know, being led by a confident hand, because it's almost like honestly, halfway into the first season, I'm like, okay, I know that these guys know what they're doing, and I can just be like, okay, whatever this goes, I'm here to kind of see the journey through, and I know that I'm in good hands. You know,
It's
kind
all
of like
very
Allstate.
intentional in a very I was about to say in a very deliberate way, which is a synonym for intentional. But
Yeah.
but it is all very deliberate as well. And so in a good way, because sometimes a lot of times things are intentional and it just doesn't work out, you know what I mean? Like the vision's not quite there, but it's all very well thought out. That's kind of the word I want, where like as you were saying even earlier with the deliberate editing of it, I feel everything kind of adds up to that. The deliberate acting choices, the deliberate cinematography choices of it. We haven't even really talked on that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of alongside the editing.
No, we can go into the cinematography.
Shots. Yeah.
There's some really, really cool shots in this show. And it's almost like deceptively like I don't know why. It's nothing like I wasn't predisposed to be like, oh, this is probably not going to be shot well, but there's like, just good TV where it's, it can stand on its writing, and then, it's shot pretty traditionally, on, back and forth, etc. But there are some really, really cool, just like sequences in this. I mean, there's one scene where essentially they're cooking meth in the field, with
in the desert.
In the desert, yeah, in the desert. And it's Jesse's actually, I think, trying to learn how to cook as well as Walter, and failing. And so there's this time lapse of this the RV at night, and then you see the sun kind of go down and then come back up, and
Badger's not helping at all.
Badger's not helping at all. And I thought that shot was just so gripping. There's quite a few shots that are just like almost feel like they're noir-esque in terms of the way they're lit and their kind of composition. But obviously it's done with a lot more kind of color. It's not as kind of on the nose of being like desaturated and, voiceover or anything like that.
It's like noir inspired, not copy.
Yeah. And I think even there's, look, we can get into like symbolisms as well in terms of the I mean, there's a scene where like Walter's like strips, and it's like, oh, like what is it? What are they trying to say about like oh, he's being stripped of his whatever. There's a lot of kind of stuff like that, but the one that I think stuck to me that I really wanted to talk about was the RV, because I think it's such an interesting idea. Well, first of all, business wise, it makes sense, RV, portable, you can cook meth wherever you want, which is the ideal way to, I think, cook. I'm not sure. I've just watched the first season.
From my experience.
And that's why we brought you, Alexa, along. But for the long time, and for those of you who are, watching this and maybe don't know kind of the American way, like American ideals or whatever, RVs, I think, are kind of a crucial point of that, because RVs have always symbolized, in my opinion, the RVs that are like in the show are middle class.
It's like the American dream.
You have a house and you have an RV where you can get in the RV and then escape. You don't have to think about work. You're going seeing national.
Yeah, I'd say not as much anymore, but that definitely was.
Unless
like
you're
a
Supreme
I feel
Court
like
judge.
You had like the vacation movies, with Chevy Chase and stuff. Like, that's what those were. Like, was the film version of that kind of trope or like idea in society. And like, I do agree with you. It's this kind of emblem of the American family, like ideal American family. Right there.
And it's kind of flipped on its head here.
Using it.
And so I stuff like that, I think, is just so, it's freedom and American dream in it, but it's kind of juxtaposed by what's actually happening there and the situation these characters are in while doing it. Because honestly, if we're really kind of digging into it, the reason why Walt's in that position is because healthcare in this country is ridiculously overpriced. And if it was maybe affordable, maybe Walt wouldn't have to cook meth and get an RV.
He wouldn't. He'd be okay on his teacher salary, a job that should be paid more as well. That's a whole other conversation. But like, he is a well-respected high school chemist teacher. Like, bro should be able to pay for his healthcare needs. But obviously that goes into two fundamental problems with American society that we're not here to talk about today. Yeah. So
a few other kind of random thoughts that I had. Unless you had a random one throughout there.
That was my main stuff I wanted to say.
There's also,
I'm not saying too much because I know a lot of my opinions and thoughts are also based on the totality of the show.
Sure.
Because even though it's been a long time, like, you remember the
head.
show. Yeah. So I'm trying not to say too much because I don't want to accidentally spoil anything for you or anyone else watching who's watching alongside us. Just watching season 1 or something.
Another thing I found really interesting was the idea of Hank being who he is. First of all, I'll say this, and only a certain like group of people will understand what it actually means. But for the general public, you'll get the gist. I really appreciate how well Hank is written in terms of like I know someone like Hank, and it's extremely accurate.
No,
especially like right from I think the first scene or the second scene, I was like, oh. That happened to me. I've had that interaction before. And so Hank's really written
and
well.
And the fact that he's a DEA agent, obviously, they're adding stakes.
Well, yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. So the Hank is a DEA agent. He's also his brother, Walter's brother-in-law, and I think it essentially makes it so it's a game of cat and mouse where the cat is in the mouse's house, but just doesn't know that it's a mouse. Like, it's like it's a very interesting setup of like, oh, where does this go from now? Like, how does this develop in the later times?
Yeah.
And then also the last thing that I'll kind of I'll harp on for now, because again, there's a lot of things that I can keep going into about.
Right. We'll talk more as we talk about the future seasons and such. We'll come back.
I'm sure
to
a lot of this will be repeated as well. But the one thing that I think kind of ties it back to maybe where this channel first started, because, obviously we started kind of talking about international stuff, and there's a few things that are comparisons I can make. But the one thing that I find super, I think Alexa maybe will appreciate, is that I think Bryan Cranston is to Walter White as Allu Arjun is to Pushpa, where it is, you cannot see them without the other. Like, they are so, like, and it's also kind of the double effect of like, that they're gonna be a badass, like they're gonna be excelling at what they do, especially because by the end of this first season, like he's dealing with like Tuco, and he's doing things that are like first of all, that explosion at Tuco's, how is he not affected at all by it? He's just walking away all cool.
And then he like starts coughing and stuff. But he played it off.
Yeah, that explosion's got to rock you. But anyway, I'm gonna go back to the payoffs and setups. As soon as he was like in the class, there's a demonstration of how to make an explosion, or like he's explaining it. There's going to be an explosion. Like that's how he's going to do it. But yeah, it's this like kind of building up of that character that is going to excel, and it's the seeing their rise. Because this is Breaking Bad Part 1, The Rise, right? Isn't it?
Yep, that's it.
And then the season 2 through 5, or The Rule, I think, is that.
And 2 through 4, and then the fifth season is actually the Rampage.
Okay, cool.
Or actually, no, El Camino, the movie that came out many years later, is the Rampage.
Yeah.
If you didn't know, there was a movie made like not when we were in like years after.
Sure. What's Better Call Saul then? Yeah, there you go. Threw some wrinkles.
That's Keseva's side movie that we're waiting for.
But yeah, hopefully
you haven't even met Saul yet.
No,
isn't that crazy?
No,
you haven't even met him yet.
Yeah, I know there's a few characters that I know kind of show up in the show,
right? From just being on the internet.
Yeah. But with that said, is before we move into the final part of the show where Alexa's going to put me in the hot seat.
Oh yeah.
It's time to have one more ad break to hear a word from our sponsor.
I don't know why I thought this would be the fastest.
I also, what the fuck? What? What?
I'm assuming Alexa killed you.
What the fuck? How's that allowed? She's fucking, oh my god. What the fuck?
2 feet from the helicopter.
What the fuck?
And what, you just killed him?
She just hit me with a bike. What the fuck was that?
All right, sir. You've been doing a lot of talking. Now I'm going to ask you questions so you can do some more talking.
Oh, dang it.
Sound good?
Yes.
So I just have a few general questions. Some of these I'll be asking across the episodes, to get your updated opinions, and then some are specific, a little bit more. But we start off with a little bit of vague ones. Is as you wrap up this first season, do you have a favorite character? Like someone where you're like, this is the one I'm most interested to watch when they're on screen, or whatever reasoning. It's a favorite character.
It's Walter. I mean, it's
really?
For me, it's just, again, it's the idea of this protagonist that I'm just really invested in, and so I want to see what happens with Walter, and just kind of like his rise, his rule, whatever it's building up to, and it's almost like this idea of maybe it's like a superhero almost, or a supervillain. I don't know how he develops later on, but
There's many debates.
but he can, there is the idea that like, there's Walter White, the teacher, and then there's Heisenberg,
Right.
his
alter ego.
right. There's Sri Kandula, the host, and there's Hindenburg, the dangerous madman. So similarly, I'm curious to see like the mythos develop and everything like that. So yeah, Walter.
Yeah. All right, and then on the reverse side of that, do you have a least favorite character?
A least favorite character?
It doesn't have to be that they're bad, but because
Yeah.
I mean, in my opinion, there isn't really a bad character. But you may have an opinion on that.
No, I don't think there's necessarily a bad character. Look, if there's anyone that I'm like in the hierarchy of lists, it's going to be a controversial take. If I'm talking about the least one, the lowest one, it's Jesse Pinkman. I don't care for Jesse as much. Yeah,
That's so interesting.
of all of them.
That's so interesting.
Mhm.
He is my favorite character.
I'm not surprised.
So that is fascinating. So you touched on this a little bit already, and obviously you just touched on a bit more. But what is like your first impressions of Walter? I mean, you've kind of given that, so I'm going to add on a little bit to that of say, what do you feel about his choices so far? Like in vague, you don't have to get into specifics, but like, do you feel like he is justified in his choices so far? Do you feel that you need to learn more, or what do you think about it?
I think that look, for me to say, yeah, I agree with, like, it would be absolutely ridiculous, because it's like just being like, yeah, I need some money. All right, I guess I'll start cooking meth. Like the leap would be too
it is
too
a big
far for me
leap.
to just immediately justify. But I do think that there's, for the most part, going with the story and being like, okay, well, it's he's
He
also a
sees
physics.
the meth
Well, he's also a
thing.
physics
Chemist.
chemistry teacher. He has access to the equipment and in the lab. All that stuff I could kind of, okay, I'm going with it, right? But the one thing that if I'm digging into it, I get the idea of the ego, but not taking the money from the friend. I was like, oh, I would have done it. If it was someone was in a situation like that, if someone was helping, I think that would have been
Your way out.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But
your alternate choice.
yeah. So like that one probably, but again, like.
So I do think it's important that they gave him that alternate choice, like for his character development.
As a conscious
which I was sort of
decision
saying,
to,
yeah,
like,
exactly.
Mhm.
Like I think that was an important choice.
Yeah, probably to dissuade people who were like, oh, why wouldn't? There's no other option. He's like, there is an option. It's just his ego is too big for him to accept any help, and especially as we said, there's a lover in there as well that kind of adds a wrinkle to things. So,
all right. So next question. So what was the most surprising moment for you in season 1 of Breaking Bad?
Most surprising moment? I don't think there's a. I don't know. Again, this is part of goes into what I was saying about how the show is so well done that by the halfway through the show, I'm like, okay, I'm here. I'm going to be for the ride. I think the surprising thing, the only thing maybe my sense of how do I say this? My sense of belief was broken, right? My sense of reality of the show was broken for a moment, was like that explosion at Tuco's, because I'm like, wait, like FBI, like that was an explosion, like no one's investigating what the hell happened to this, like it's a pretty significant explosion,
right?
It's not for nothing, but like no one's like, it's a terrorist attack, like nothing's happening there. So that one was like a little bit.
There's no old woman down the street making phone calls.
Right, yeah. So
yeah, that's valid. Okay, so while we did start off with the villain, like our antagonists, and I'm going to use the word villain for this, but the antagonists kind of Crazy 8 and Emmanuel, they were one swiftly taken care of, the other drawn out a bit. But we, of course, get introduced to a new antagonist near the end of the show, as you stated, with Tuco. Do you have any thoughts on where you think that relationship is going to go? Because it kind of ends with them, partnering up with him a bit officially.
Yeah.
Is the start, is where the show leaves off. So
look, and everything I say about the show, it could be super accurate or super wrong, right? Like I don't know.
These are your guesses,
right?
That's why I'm asking.
But I
really
really
then we
want
can compare.
I really want to emphasize that my entire knowledge of the show was the 30 minutes maybe or to 40 minutes I've seen of the first episode. I haven't seen anything else, and I think that maybe there's.
You knew there was a character named Saul. You knew two actors
I
who
know,
were in it later.
I know Giancarlo Esposito's in it.
Right.
That's about
That's
it.
Might
be it.
That's about it.
But I think if I'm thinking in my head of what this would be, would happen next, or like where would this build up to, I feel like it's just, the show is going to be essentially a bunch of escalations of like, okay, you got the entry level bad guy. They're dealt with. They're dealt with. They've changed Walt in some way, and then you have Tuco, who has also already changed Walter in some way, but
created Heisenberg.
And created Heisenberg, and then I think that the rest of the show, I feel like that's the setup, is a bunch of, he's going to go through his cancer and dealing with family and making sure that his family's not entirely like, his family doesn't know about it. And then, and actually, I'll say this as well. I think one surprise that I've had is that I wasn't expecting him to say that he had cancer so fast, especially because he didn't say it initially. Yeah. I feel like initially, if he didn't say it initially, I thought he was just it was a secret that he's going to hold for a while. But I wasn't surprised. I was surprised with that. But back to it, yeah. So it'll be like a new character comes in, Tuco dies or has to be, is whatever. And then like Tuco's boss comes in, or like some other guy's like, oh, you thought Tuco was bad. This guy's bigger, and then like, okay, well, how is Walt going to deal with this guy? And
right,
someone's going to be like a psychopath, Tuco's a psychopath, let's be honest, but like
a worse one,
a worse psychopath,
a smarter one, like
right, and like someone's going to be, I just can't imagine.
That's the only way you can get, I think, worse as it said from
right. So like, there's different shades that I think will kind of he'll be dealing with.
So do you have any thoughts on where you think the show is going to like end up, like at the end of season 5 yet? You can say no.
At the end of season 5, I don't have a strong like. Again, I'm here for the ride, so I'm willing to see where it goes without any kind of baggage of like, I think this should,
right.
I don't want to have those.
That's
kind
why
of expectations.
I said you can.
But I will say like, I don't know. Look, there's really two ways that I think the show like this could end, and it's the character getting away scot-free or the character getting his comeuppance. Like it's one or the other, right? So it's either I don't know, he's made his thing and he's retires in some nice place, or maybe he's like, here, I'll say this is my official guess. He's Jesse's like, something happens, you think Walt's dead, Jesse's on the low, he's trying to get away from it, he's in like Italy or something getting a drink, and he's like orders his coffee, and he looks over and he sees Walt White, but like with shaved, like so he doesn't have the look, and they just kind of look at each other and they nod, and then they cut to black. Breaking Bad.
I love it. I love it. All right, so only 2 more questions.
Oh my God, this is an exam?
Yeah. So what is your biggest unanswered question going into season 2? Like, what's the thing you like really want to know as you finish off season 1?
Really want to know. I mean, what base did he get to with that one woman? I mean,
that's your big unanswered question.
I'm like, wow, like yeah. I mean, she's still so attached, or what he's packing. I mean, like how is he?
These 2 beautiful women.
How's I mean, like she's still thinking about him, and she's a married woman to a rich dude. Like the dude's filthy rich, and she's like, wow, Walter, like what?
And Skylar, she's a beautiful woman, pregnant again, old, bit out of elevated age, Yeah. But we didn't even talk about that whole aspect of it, the fact that he is going to be a father soon. Second father. Second kid.
Yeah.
Father times 2. But yeah, which is a whole other aspect. All right, so the last question is softball.
Okay.
So far, after watching season 1, would you recommend this show?
Yes, I mean that's a pretty.
That's why I said softball.
A pretty easy yes.
Softball.
But again, I also want to emphasize kind of what I said at the start of the episode, which is if you start the show and you're like, oh, this is not for me, this is not hitting right, I don't get why people say this is so amazing. It might not be the right time. So like go watch something else.
Watch Seinfeld.
Go watch Seinfeld. It's easy to recommend. It's easy to recommend a show about nothing, really.
Yeah.
And especially I think there's certain times where either mentally or just kind of societally, you're just like, I don't want to deal with real.
You want a fluff show.
Yeah, and there's definitely parts of this show where I'm like I just kept going like, fuck, cancer sucks. Like it's such a.
No, they really hit you with like the raw emotional aspect of the cancer side of it, and also even with like the drug making business side of it. Like they hit you with the emotions of
the
characters.
People who make drugs have
but like
hard.
With Jesse's like the emotional turmoil of them dealing with Crazy 8 and Emmanuel. Like there's all this stuff that they have to deal with that they make you connect with. Even those crazier things like, oh, he has to dissolve a body in acid, and then it's like, how can we make this as terrible as possible? But you know, like Jesse and Walt with his task have such like this emotional turmoil in that, and alongside everything else happening. And I feel like, again, kudos to the acting and the writing and everything else, but it feels so real, like all of the emotions that the characters are feeling. And that's what I think is the thing that draws me to the show the most. Like, there's all these other great things that we've talked about, but the emotion of it and the way that you fully connect with these characters, like you were even saying with Walt, you know, he's doing these not the best things, but you are rooting for him.
Yeah.
Even though you shouldn't be at all times. Like, you're rooting, like, he has a guy locked up in a basement, like, and you're rooting for him. Like, what?
Yeah.
So it's definitely, it's a unique situation to be in as a viewer. That's like, you know, there's a lot of movies with anti-heroes and things like that, and shows as well, but few do it, I think, as well as the season 1 does it with Walter White and the other characters.
Yeah. So I would recommend it. If you're not feeling it right away, it's okay to come back to it a later time, or maybe commit to doing a video series where you're talking about them. Then you have a reason to do it. But with that said, people, we hope you enjoyed the very first episode of The Catch Up. And as of now, we're all caught up on season 1 of Breaking Bad. Once again, the show, like all of our other series on this channel, are impacted by what you say and what you comment. So let us know down below, first of all, what you thought about Breaking Bad yourself. Just season 1. I swear to God, if there's any spoilers, I'm banning you.
Please don't spoil it for him. He's avoided spoilers so long.
Yes, yeah.
Please.
Just like how Alexa avoided the fact that the twist of The Sixth Sense somehow...
it's true. For many years.
For many years.
many years. It came out, I think, before I was born, and I didn't watch it till I was in my 20s.
Or shortly
she had
after
no
I was
idea.
born. And that's exactly how I want to go into Breaking Bad. And also, if you have other shows that you want us to kind of tackle first, one thing we'll say, we're looking for a good limited series, one season show that maybe we can kind of intervene with, or
so one episode of The Catch Up instead of, you know, a 5-episode arc like we're gonna have here. Yeah, maybe even 6 if we choose to add the movie onto the end.
So again, all those down in the comments. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Thanks to everybody who's sticking around for the reboot. We appreciate all the support. And without further ado, Alexa, as always, have a good night, a good morning, and a damn good time.
Bye.